It was one of those mornings where the air felt heavy, like the city hadn't quite woken up yet. The lobby of Sterling & Combe Investment Partners smelled faintly of polished marble and burnt coffee. Jordan Lee stood near the reception desk, a worn leather portfolio tucked under her arm, wearing a blazer that had seen better days. She blended in with the handful of new interns huddled by the glass conference room, except for the way she stood, straight-backed, calm, almost too composed for someone on their first day. Across the room, Greg Walters, the senior manager, didn't bother to hide the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He slid a thin stack of paperwork across the table toward her, not even looking up from his phone. "Here's the intern packet," he said flatly, the words carrying a weight that wasn't quite friendly. Jordan reached for it, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the mahogany table. She caught the faint reflection of herself in the polished wood, calm eyes, steady hands. Before she could move the papers away, Greg leaned back and tipped his coffee cup just a little too far. A dark stream spilled across the table, racing toward her blazer sleeve. "Oops," he said without an ounce of apology. "You might want to clean that up before the real meeting starts." The other interns shifted uncomfortably. A blonde girl at the far end, Hayley Brooks, hid her smile behind perfectly manicured fingers. Her phone was tilted just enough to catch Jordan in the frame. Somewhere on social media, a live stream counter ticked higher. Jordan didn't flinch. She reached for a napkin, calmly blotting the coffee before it reached her portfolio. Inside, a thin metal edge caught the light. A black corporate access badge most people in this building would recognize instantly. But nobody noticed. Not yet. Ever been judged so completely wrong, she thought, that you let silence become your sharpest weapon? She closed the portfolio, smoothed her sleeve, and gave Greg a polite nod. Noted. Her voice was even, almost warm, but deep inside she had already started taking mental notes. Time, place, tone, every detail. Because some people think they're untouchable. And sometimes the only way to prove them wrong is to let them keep talking. By the time Jordan stepped out into the hallway, the hum of the office was in full swing. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, voices blending into the steady rhythm of corporate life. She carried the stack of intern forms toward the desk of Patricia Hayes, the executive assistant who seemed to run the place without ever looking rushed. Patricia glanced up briefly, then back to her screen. "Coffee orders are on the whiteboard, 12 total. Don't mix them up." Her tone wasn't unkind, but it left no room for questions. Jordan scanned the list. Oat milk lattes, almond milk cappuccinos, one large black coffee with a splash of hazelnut syrup, and Greg Walters' order underlined twice. Double espresso, oat milk, heated to exactly 140 degrees. Downstairs, the corner cafe was already crowded. Jordan stood in line, reciting the orders in her head while her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. A notification flashed, an encrypted message from someone she knew well. Board meeting moved up, 6 o'clock sharp, materials are ready. She quickly swiped it away before anyone behind her could see. When she returned to the 47th floor balancing 2 cardboard trays, she moved quietly from desk to desk, setting drinks down without spilling a drop. Most people barely looked up, mumbling thanks. When she reached Greg's office, she tapped gently on the doorframe. "Finally," he said without glancing at her. "Set it down." She placed the cup within his reach, catching a glimpse of his computer screen. An email thread full of subject lines that made her pause. Candidate didn't fit the culture. Diversity quotas are a joke, lowering standards. She didn't linger, just one slow blink, a nod, and then she stepped back into the hallway. The details were already filed away in her mind, each piece fitting into a puzzle only she could see. The rest of the morning passed in quiet assignments, sorting files in a cramped copy room, stapling packets, making labels. Now and then people walked by and glanced in, some with polite smiles, others with the kind of look that said, "I wonder how long she'll last." It was Mr. Rodriguez, the building's longtime janitor, who finally broke the silence. He leaned on his mop, peering into the room. "You holding up okay?" Jordan looked up from a stack of reports. "I'm fine, thanks. I've seen a lot of new hires in this place," he said with a knowing smile. "Most of them don't make it past the first week, but you're different. Before Jordan could answer, Hayley Brooks appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Still here?" she said, half laughing. "Thought you'd have quit by now." The red record light on her screen winked in the reflection of the filing cabinet. Jordan didn't take the bait. She just kept sorting the files, her voice even. "What background do you think that is?" Hayley hesitated for a beat before smirking. "Oh, more practical, less academic." She left before Mr. Rodriguez could say more, her phone still pointed toward the door. Jordan slid the last folder into place, her hands steady. Some people didn't realise that every careless word could leave a trail, and today she was making sure none of them disappeared. Lunch came and went without much of a break. Jordan found an empty corner table in the cafeteria, picking at a turkey sandwich while flipping through the small notebook she carried everywhere. The pages were already filling up, names, times, quotes, each written in her neat, deliberate handwriting. Across the room, Greg sat with 3 department heads, his voice carrying just far enough for her to hear. "We're running a business, not some charity experiment," he said, leaning back like a man holding court. "She can't even handle coffee orders. How's she going to understand complex deals?" Laughter rippled around the table. Jordan lowered her gaze, jotting down every word without hesitation. She didn't look angry. If anything, she looked patient. On the other side of the cafeteria, Hayley was still glued to her phone, the lens angled just enough to catch Jordan in the frame. The small red recording light blinked like a metronome, steady and persistent. But in the far corner, someone else was watching, a security guard named Marcus Thompson. He'd worked in the building for years and had seen plenty of interns come and go. Something about Jordan's quiet composure tugged at his memory. He couldn't quite place where he'd seen her before, but the thought lingered. By mid-afternoon, the tension shifted. Greg called all the interns into a glass-walled conference room for what he called a quick educational review. 20-some employees gathered outside, curious. Inside, Hayley adjusted her phone on the table, pretending to take notes while angling it for the perfect shot. "Let's start simple," Greg said, locking eyes on Jordan. "Explain return on investment." Her answer came without hesitation, clear, precise, and correct. A faint murmur passed through the room. Greg tried again. "Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization?" She answered that one too, word perfect. Now the murmurs grew louder. Someone near the door raised an eyebrow, impressed. Greg's smile tightened. "All right, let's make it interesting." He pulled up a quarterly financial statement on the large screen. "Walk us through this. Cash flow first." Jordan stepped forward, scanning the page for a moment before speaking. Her explanation was calm, detailed, and, judging by the expressions around the table, spot on. Even the senior analysts outside the room leaned in. When she finished, Greg leaned against the table, searching for a way to dismiss her performance. His words were slower this time, laced with something sharper. "You can memorize all the textbook answers you want, but real business is about instinct and knowing the right kind of people." The sentence hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jordan simply closed her notebook and returned to her seat, her expression unreadable. But inside, she could feel the puzzle pieces clicking into place. The day was far from over, and she was nowhere near done. By the time the clock edged toward 3, the air on the 47th floor felt different, thicker somehow, like a storm was rolling in. Jordan stepped out of the copy room carrying a stack of neatly organised files, only to hear voices coming from Greg's office. The door was ajar just enough for the words to spill into the hallway. "She's making me look bad," Greg muttered. His tone was low but full of irritation. "We need to get rid of her before she causes more trouble." Sarah Chen, one of the department heads, spoke next. "Claims she's disruptive. We can say she's not following procedures. That'll stick." Another voice chimed in, Michael Torres from Corporate Strategy. "Or frame it as a safety issue. We can get HR to back us up on that." Greg's chuckle was cold. "Perfect. I'll have Patricia draw up the paperwork." Jordan kept walking, her footsteps silent on the carpet, her expression unchanged. But the words were already etched in her mind. She didn't need to write them down. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "This is Marcus from security. We need to talk. Break room on 42. The staff break room was quieter than the rest of the building, with a view of the city that made it feel a world away from the tension upstairs. Marcus was waiting at a small table with 2 paper cups of coffee. "I know who you are," he said in a voice meant only for her. "3 months ago, I saw you here with the board from the parent company. You were asking about security protocols." Jordan didn't confirm or deny it. She just raised an eyebrow, inviting him to continue. "I've been watching what's happening today," Marcus said. "That live video is getting passed around, but Greg's moving fast. He's talking to HR about filing a complaint against you. Says you went into restricted areas and handled confidential files without permission." Jordan let the information settle for a moment. "When?" "He's meeting with HR at 4. Patricia's already working on the forms. If they file before you can respond, it's going to get messy." She sipped the coffee he'd set in front of her, her gaze steady. "Can you get me the building's camera footage from today? Every angle, every floor I've been on, plus the conference room and Greg's office." Marcus leaned back, studying her. "That's a lot of video. What are you planning to do?" Jordan's lips curved into the faintest smile. Sometimes the truth needs more than one witness. When she left the break room, the calm in her step was the same as it had been that morning. But now, every move she made was part of a countdown, and Greg Walters had no idea the clock was ticking. By mid-afternoon, the tension snapped into something more visible. Greg's voice came over the intercom, firm and clipped. "All interns to the main conference room, now." Jordan joined the others, walking into the glass-walled space where Greg stood at the head of the table. Outside, employees were already gathering, curious to see what was going on. The air felt heavy, the kind of heavy that made people whisper without realizing it. "Due to recent behavior issues," Greg began, "we're addressing some concerns immediately." His eyes locked on Jordan like she was the only one in the room. "Some interns have been seen in restricted areas, handling materials they shouldn't, and creating tension among the team." She sat still, hands folded neatly in front of her, listening as if she had all the time in the world. "Jordan Lee," Greg continued, "these violations have been documented. HR will be reviewing your case for possible dismissal." The other interns shifted in their seats. Brad, a quiet guy from Northwestern, finally spoke up. "That's not true. She's been helping all of us. She hasn't done anything wrong." Greg's glare could have cut glass. "Mr. Patterson, no one asked for your input." Haley leaned forward, phone in hand. "I've got videos. She was definitely acting suspicious." But out in the hallway, more employees had gathered. People who had seen the way the day had unfolded. They knew who had been acting out of line. The murmurs started low, then grew into a kind of hum of disapproval aimed squarely at Greg. Jordan finally spoke, her tone calm and steady. "Mr. Walters, are you formally accusing me of misconduct?" "I'm stating facts," he shot back. "Then could you be specific? Dates, times, what materials I supposedly accessed? Witnesses other than Ms. Brooks?" Greg shuffled through a few papers, stalling. "You know what you did." "I'm asking for clarity," she said evenly, "because without it, these claims sound like an attempt to push out someone you don't want here." The room went still. Even Haley's phone lowered a few inches. Outside the glass, the crowd pressed closer. At that moment, Jordan's phone buzzed with a short message from Marcus. "Boardroom is ready. Legal and HR are here. Whenever you're ready." She looked at the clock on the wall. 4 o'clock exactly. Her gaze shifted back to Greg, her expression almost kind. "In that case, I think it's time we bring in a few more people for this conversation." No one in that room could have guessed how quickly the balance of power was about to change. Jordan rose from her seat slowly, the quiet scrape of the chair legs cutting through the uneasy silence. Every eye followed her as she walked to the head of the table, stopping just short of Greg's open laptop, which was still connected to the large screen on the wall. "What are you doing?" Greg's voice cracked just slightly, the first sign of a chip in his confidence. "I'd like to show everyone something important," she said, her tone even but carrying enough weight to still the small murmurs outside the glass. "You can't touch my computer," he snapped. "That's private property." From the doorway, Marcus appeared, leaning casually against the frame, a coffee cup in one hand and his building security badge glinting under the lights. He didn't move to stop her. If anything, his presence was a quiet signal. He was there to make sure no one else did either. Jordan's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Within seconds, the wall screen lit up with an inbox full of email threads. Subject lines alone made the air feel colder. Not a culture fit. Quotas ruining quality. Lowering standards. She clicked one open. From Greg Walters to Sarah Chen. Another one of these hires coming in. This is why our numbers are slipping. A hush fell over the room. People outside craned their necks to see better. Phones were already in hand, some recording, others taking photos of the screen. Another email appeared. Reject this applicant, too ethnic, won't represent us well with certain clients. Jordan's voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. The words themselves carried enough weight to press the room into stillness. Greg lunged forward, slamming the laptop closed, but the damage was done. The images of those emails were already saved on half a dozen devices. "This is a violation," he barked, pointing at her. "You've crossed a legal line." Jordan met his glare with calm, steady eyes. "Not exactly. Company communications that show discrimination aren't protected under privacy laws. They're evidence of a hostile workplace." Someone outside the conference room let out a quiet, "Oh man," under their breath. Greg's mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence around him wasn't just awkward now, it was isolating. Jordan picked up her portfolio from the table and unzipped it. From inside, she pulled a polished silver badge on a lanyard, setting it gently in front of him. The company name engraved on it was unmistakable. "My name is Jordan Lee. I'm not here as an intern. I'm here on behalf of the board of the parent company that owns the majority of Sterling & Co." Her voice was still measured, but now there was an edge of finality to it. Outside the glass walls, someone whispered, "Oh, she's his boss," and the wave of realization rippled through the crowd. "I've been here all day," Jordan continued, "to see exactly how people are treated when they have no power. I wanted to see what you would do." She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "And I've seen enough." Greg didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His expression said everything. The tide in the room had shifted. Completely. The door to the conference room opened wider, and two members of the corporate legal team stepped in, followed by the head of human resources. Behind them, a few board members from the parent company filed quietly into the space, their presence enough to make the air shift. Conversations outside the glass stopped altogether. Greg took a step back, glancing at each face as though searching for someone to rescue him. No one moved. Jordan stayed where she was, portfolio still in hand. "We're going to keep this simple," she said, looking first at the legal counsel, then at the HR director. "What you're about to hear is not an allegation, it's documentation." She placed a small flash drive on the table. Video from today, emails pulled from company servers, statements from witnesses, every one of them points to a consistent pattern of discrimination and targeted harassment. The head of HR, a woman named Linda Evans, picked up the drive like it was heavier than it looked. "We'll need to review this immediately." "You'll have the chance," Jordan replied. "But for the sake of transparency, we're starting that process right here, in front of everyone who's been watching this unfold." Greg scoffed, trying to regain his footing. "This is a stunt. You think humiliating me in front of a crowd makes you right?" Jordan turned to face him fully. "What makes me right are the words you typed yourself, the actions you took when you thought no one would hold you accountable, and the lives you've made harder because of them." Brad, the quiet intern, spoke from the far end of the table. "I saw it, all of it. She's telling the truth." Murmurs rose again outside the room, louder this time. Some of the employees watching pressed their phones to the glass, recording everything. Jordan's gaze softened just a fraction as she looked around the room. Respect isn't something you give only to people you think can help you. It's the baseline for every interaction, every role, every person in this building. Without it, you don't have a team, you have a problem. Greg shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. Jordan straightened. "The boardroom upstairs is ready. We'll be taking this meeting there now, with the full leadership present. Anyone involved in today's events will have the opportunity to speak, but I suggest you think carefully about what you say." The legal team gathered their things, HR followed. Jordan walked toward the door, the small crowd outside instinctively parting to make way for her. Marcus stepped in behind her, a silent wall of support. Greg stayed frozen at the head of the table, watching the path clear for the woman he had spent the day trying to push out. He didn't realise it yet, but the next time he sat in a meeting, it wouldn't be at the head of any table. The elevator ride to the top floor was quiet, except for the faint hum of the cables pulling them upward. Jordan stood near the doors, portfolio tucked under her arm, eyes fixed ahead. Marcus was beside her, his presence solid but unobtrusive. Behind them, Greg shifted from foot to foot, the weight of what awaited him settling deeper with each passing floor. When the doors opened, the atmosphere changed immediately. The executive boardroom stretched out before them, long polished table, high-backed chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows spilling late afternoon light across the city skyline. Around the table sat the parent company's board members and senior executives, their expressions calm but unreadable. James Morrison, the board chair, stood to greet Jordan. "Ms. Lee," he said warmly, "thank you for joining us. We understand you've completed your on-site review." Jordan nodded. "Yes, sir, I have the full report ready." She took her seat at the head of the table, the spot reserved for the person running the meeting. Greg lingered near the doorway until James gestured toward a chair farther down. "Mr. Walters, please be seated." A large monitor on the wall flickered to life, displaying the first slide of Jordan's presentation. 3 simple words in bold letters: Workplace Culture Audit. "This," Jordan began, her voice steady, "is the result of today's undercover review, supported by months of prior observation and documentation." She clicked to the next slide. The words on the screen weren't just numbers, they were stories. Retention rates, employee survey comments, patterns in promotions and demotions. "Since Mr. Walters assumed his current role," she continued, "minority employee retention dropped by nearly half. Internal complaints citing bias increased by over 70%. Department productivity fell 18%, largely due to turnover and disengagement." Greg tried to interrupt. "Those numbers don't tell the whole story." "Jan." Jordan didn't raise her voice, but the calm precision in her tone cut clean through his. "The numbers are only the surface. The emails, the recorded interactions, the corroborated witness accounts, those are the story, and they match the numbers exactly." She advanced the slide again, and the screen filled with excerpts from Greg's own messages. None of them were doctored, none taken out of context. Each one was a clear piece of a larger pattern. The room was silent except for the faint click of pens as board members took notes. "Today," Jordan went on, "I was treated as someone with no authority, no influence, and no value to this company. What happened was not the result of misunderstanding or poor communication. It was a reflection of an entrenched mindset. One that not only undermines the dignity of individuals, but costs this business real money and talent." She let that settle before clicking to the final slide of the opening section. Recommendations for immediate action. "I'll go through each of these in detail," she said, "but make no mistake, the longer this behaviour goes unchecked, the higher the cost, and not just in dollars." No one in that room was looking at Greg anymore. All eyes were on Jordan. Jordan clicked to the next slide, and the monitor filled with faces. Photographs of former employees who had left the company in the past 2 years. Each image had a name beneath it, along with the position they once held. "These are the people whose careers were cut short here," she said. "Not because they weren't capable, but because they were made to feel they didn't belong." She tapped a small remote, and a short video clip began to play. A young woman appeared on screen, seated in a modest living room. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I loved my job here, but after months of being left out of meetings and having my work questioned in ways others didn't experience, I realised it wasn't going to change. So I left." The screen faded to another face, an older man in a button-down shirt. "I'd been in finance for 20 years, but when I spoke up about a client's offensive remarks, I was told to be less sensitive. That was my last week here." Jordan didn't look away from the screen as each story played. These aren't isolated incidents, they're part of a pattern that's been tolerated because speaking out was treated as a risk instead of a responsibility. She let the screen go dark before continuing. "We've measured the financial cost of this turnover. Lost productivity, recruitment expenses, training new hires. But those numbers don't capture the human cost. People going home every night feeling smaller than when they arrived in the morning. People questioning their worth because of how they were treated at work." A board member at the far end of the table cleared his throat. "Ms. Lee, are you recommending disciplinary action against specific individuals?" "Yes," Jordan replied without hesitation. "Mr. Walters should be terminated for cause. Others who participated in or enabled this behaviour should be reassigned or removed from positions where they can impact hiring and advancement decisions. She turned toward Greg. You had 8 hours today to show the kind of leader you could be when you thought no one important was watching. You used that time to belittle, to exclude, and to plot against someone you believed was powerless. That isn't leadership, it's liability. Greg's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Jordan faced the board again. Accountability isn't about revenge. It's about making sure this company's culture reflects its values. Respect, opportunity, and fairness should not depend on someone's title, background, or connections. If they do, we lose more than profit. We lose integrity. The room was quiet for a moment, heavy with the weight of what had been laid out. Outside the glass, the city lights were beginning to flicker on, each one a reminder that work like this didn't stop at the walls of this building. The board chair, James Morrison, broke the silence. "We've heard enough," he said, his voice steady but edged with disappointment. "Let's take this to a vote." One by one, the board members raised their hands. Termination for Greg Walters, unanimous. Reassignment for the other managers named in the report, unanimous. The HR director's eyes flickered, as if realising she'd have work to do before the day was over. Greg leaned forward, his voice a low plea. "I have a family, a mortgage, kids in school. You don't have to do this." Jordan looked at him, her expression not unkind but unyielding. "Every person you pushed out of this company had those same things. Did you think about their families when you made them feel unwelcome, when you blocked their careers because of who they were?" He had no answer. The legal team gathered the evidence, HR began drafting the formal notices, and security waited quietly by the door. Jordan closed her portfolio and stood. "This is where the cleanup starts," she told the board. "Not with statements or slogans, but with daily choices about how we treat each other." A few hours later, the floor that had been tense all day felt different. Greg and the others were gone, escorted out without ceremony. People moved through the halls without the usual guarded glances. Conversations felt lighter, more open. Jordan stopped by the facilities office where Mr. Rodriguez was finishing his shift. He looked up in surprise as she handed him an envelope. "What's this?" "A scholarship fund," she said, "in your name, for students from underrepresented backgrounds who want to work in finance. You've spent years seeing the best and worst of this place, and you still treat everyone with dignity. That deserves more than just a thank you." The older man's eyes softened, his hands trembling slightly as he took the envelope. "I never thought anyone noticed." "I did," Jordan replied, "and now a lot more people will." As she headed toward the elevator, Brad caught up with her, a grin on his face. "I don't think I've ever seen a day like this." "You will," Jordan said, pressing the call button. "Because the point isn't to catch people doing the wrong thing, it's to build a place where doing the right thing is the only option." When the elevator doors closed, the city stretched out below her, glowing against the night sky. She knew the work ahead wouldn't be easy, but today had proved something she'd always believed. Real change starts when someone refuses to stay silent. And sometimes, all it takes to change an entire company is one person willing to take notes, wait for the right moment, and tell the truth. Jordan proved that real power can be quiet, built on patience, observation, and the right moment to act. Respect should never depend on someone's title or status, and how you treat people when you think no one's watching reveals your true character. Change starts when even one person refuses to stay silent. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time. If this story touched you, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to Rain Inside for more heartfelt stories. I'll see you in the next one.